A census taker once tried to test me. I ate his liver with some fava beans and a nice Chianti. The Silence of the Lambs wasn't just another psychological thriller, it was a cultural earthquake that redefined horror, crime, and cinema itself. What audiences didn't know was how chaotic, dangerous, and downright strange the production became. From bizarre casting choices to spine chilling on set accidents, this wasn't a film, it was a battle of wills behind the camera. Today, we're peeling back the skin to expose 20 weird facts about the Silence of the Lambs. And trust me, the bonus fact at the end is one you'll never forget. Let's dive in the role that almost went to Michelle Pfeiffer. Michelle Pfeiffer was Jonathan Demme's first choice for Clarice Starling. She read the script, praised its intensity, but ultimately walked away. Why? She later admitted the story was too evil. Pfeiffer feared audiences wouldn't separate her from the film's brutality. That left the role wide open. Enter Jodie Foster, who had been campaigning hard for it. Foster had read Thomas Harris's novel years earlier and saw herself in Clarice's grit and vulnerability. She fought to convince Demme she was the only one who could do it. Not a rejection, but a blessing in disguise. Pfeiffer's refusal cleared the path for Foster's Oscar-winning performance. Audiences didn't know they were watching history reshaped by one actress's fear. Hannibal Lecter was almost played by Gene Hackman. Believe it or not, Anthony Hopkins wasn't the obvious choice. The rights to the novel were initially acquired by Gene Hackman, who planned to star as Hannibal Lecter and direct the film himself. But after Mississippi Burning, Hackman reconsidered. He thought another role as a dark, violent figure might harm his reputation. So he backed out. Hopkins was brought in, and his chilling delivery forever defined cinematic evil. Ironically, Hackman's withdrawal didn't just change casting, it changed the tone. Hopkins approached Lecter with elegance and restraint, crafting a villain not of brute force, but of intellect. Audiences got more than a monster. They got a devil in human skin. The set was filled with real prison guards. When Clarice first meets Hannibal in his underground cell block, the sense of institutional dread feels painfully authentic. That's because Jonathan Demme hired real corrections officers as background actors. Filming took place inside a disused wing of the Pittsburgh State Penitentiary. The guards gave the set a gritty, procedural authenticity and even advised on how prisoners might behave. The realism was so striking that some cast members later admitted they felt genuine unease walking through those corridors. Not set dressing, but the real machinery of human confinement. That choice blurred the line between performance and reality, leaving the crew shaken. The moth in the throat wasn't CGI. The iconic image of a moth lodged inside a victim's throat wasn't special effects trickery, it was practical and very real. The death's head hawk moths were imported from England and carefully handled by professional bug wranglers. To pull off the throat shot, filmmakers used a dental dam placed inside the actor's mouth, allowing the insect to safely rest without risk of being swallowed. The result is grotesquely convincing. Imagine holding a live moth at the back of your throat while cameras roll. Not illusion, but raw endurance. The image became the movie's most haunting symbol of transformation and obsession. Hopkins' blinkless stare was intentional. Anthony Hopkins' portrayal of Hannibal Lecter is unforgettable for many reasons. But here's one you may not have noticed. He barely blinks on camera. Hopkins deliberately trained himself to reduce blinking, believing it would make Lecter seem more reptilian, predatory, and unsettling. It worked. Audiences instinctively sense something unnatural in his gaze. Hopkins drew inspiration from reptiles and predatory birds, creatures that watch and wait before striking. That tiny physical detail created waves of unease, proving that horror isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the quiet absence of something as human as a blink. Jodie Foster's accent sparked heated debate. When Jodie Foster stepped into Clarice Starling's shoes, she adopted a thick West Virginia accent to ground her character in rural authenticity. But Jonathan Demme wasn't convinced at first. He worried the accent would distract audiences or even sound caricatured. Foster pushed back, insisting Clarice's background was essential to the story. A woman clawing her way out of poverty and prejudice. After heated discussions, Demme relented. Critics later praised the choice, saying it gave Clarice her humanity and grit. The accent wasn't theatrical, it was social context. It carried the weight of class struggle, making every interaction with Lecter more poignant. Foster didn't just act, she fought for her character's soul. The infamous Chianti line was improvised. That chilling line, "I ate his liver with some fava beans and a nice Chianti," was scripted, but the hiss that followed? Pure Anthony Hopkins. He added the slurping, sucking sound spontaneously during filming. The crew was stunned into silence. Demme loved it and kept it in. That small improvisation transformed the moment from chilling to unforgettable. Hopkins later said he thought Lecter should enjoy frightening people with small theatrical flourishes. It wasn't just a line, it was a performance within a performance. That hiss burrowed into pop culture, echoing in countless parodies. What audiences didn't know was that one creepy noise was never in the script. It was born in the moment. The Buffalo Bill scene that haunted everyone. Ted Levine's portrayal of Buffalo Bill is terrifying, but the infamous dance scene wasn't written exactly as it appeared. Levine himself suggested Buffalo Bill would likely film himself performing bizarre rituals. He choreographed the dance, including the now iconic tuck, to capture Bill's grotesque search for identity. Filming the scene left cast and crew shaken. Levine later confessed he worried the performance would ruin his career. Instead, it became one of cinema's most disturbing villain portrayals. Not sensationalism, but raw psychological horror. Audiences felt unsettled because they were watching something disturbingly real. An actor unafraid to descend into darkness. The real FBI was involved. The Silence of the Lambs didn't just borrow the FBI as a backdrop, it had their cooperation. The Bureau allowed Demme and his crew access to Quantico training facilities, interviews with agents, and even let Foster observe behavioral science classes. This collaboration lent authenticity, but also sparked controversy. Some critics accused the FBI of using the film as recruitment propaganda, glamorizing their work to attract more female applicants. Indeed, after the film's release, applications from women reportedly spiked. Not just cinema, but cultural engineering. Audiences weren't only entertained, they were being shown a dramatized advertisement for real-world law enforcement. Hopkins won an Oscar for just 16 minutes on screen. Anthony Hopkins' performance feels towering, omnipresent. Yet he appears for only around 16 minutes of the film's 2-hour runtime. That brevity makes his Best Actor Academy Award remarkable, one of the shortest performances ever to win. Hopkins knew less could be more. His presence lingers over every scene, even when he's off-screen. His chilling economy of movement and voice created a villain who dominates without overstaying. It wasn't quantity but intensity. Those 16 minutes became cinematic immortality, reminding us that power doesn't come from time, it comes from precision. The prison escape scene used buckets of blood. When Hannibal Lecter stages his brutal escape, the scene erupts in gore, splattered walls, mangled flesh, and a guard's face grotesquely peeled away. To achieve this, the crew used buckets of stage blood and carefully constructed prosthetics. The sound team added bone-crunching effects layered with raw meat being torn. Hopkins delivered his movements with clinical precision, making the violence scarier because it wasn't frenzied, it was methodical. Cast members later admitted the set stank of fake blood and latex for days. Not spectacle, but surgical horror. The result wasn't just a shocking set piece, it cemented Lecter as a predator who could strike anywhere, anytime. Ted Levine's voice was a Frankenstein creation. Buffalo Bill's eerie, fluctuating voice wasn't random. Ted Levine designed it by blending multiple inspirations. He studied recordings of serial killers, mixed in elements of drag performance, and layered his own guttural tones. Levine explained that Bill's fractured identity should echo in his voice. Not masculine, not feminine, but disturbingly in between. The delivery unsettled not just audiences, but even fellow actors during shooting. Jodie Foster admitted that every scene with Levine made her skin crawl because his voice felt so unnatural. Not mimicry, but invention. That unsettling cadence turned a fictional villain into something that felt disturbingly authentic. A prop head freaked out the crew. In one memorable scene, a severed head is discovered inside a storage unit. That head wasn't a cheap rubber mold. It was a hyper-realistic prop crafted with painstaking detail by makeup artists. To enhance authenticity, the team used human hair and dental prosthetics. Crew members recalled opening the box during takes and feeling genuine revulsion. One even refused to touch it. Jonathan Demme insisted on this realism because he wanted the audience to feel Clarice's shock, not just see it. The horror wasn't exaggerated, it was tactile. That severed head became a symbol of the film's brutal commitment to authenticity. Hopkins studied real murderers for Lecter. To craft Lecter's chilling presence, Anthony Hopkins studied notorious killers. He watched footage of Charles Manson's interviews, read about Ted Bundy's manipulative charm, and studied spree killer Gary Heidnick's clinical detachment. Hopkins blended these traits into Lecter's persona: Manson's hypnotic calm, Bundy's surface-level charm, and Heidnick's cold calculation. But Hopkins added elegance, turning brutality into sophistication. He later explained that he wanted Lecter to look through people, not at them. Not a caricature, but a composite. The result was a villain so convincing that psychologists later analyzed his performance in academic journals as an example of manipulative psychopathology. The basement finale almost broke. Jodie Foster. The climactic chase in Buffalo Bill's pitch-black basement tested Foster's nerves like nothing else. Filming in near-total darkness, she wore night vision goggles in some takes to mimic Bill's view. The confined space, crawling insects, and silence made the shoot claustrophobic. Foster later admitted she genuinely panicked during certain takes, forgetting for a moment it was a set. Levine, staying in character, stalked her in the shadows, making each take more intense. Not acting, but survival. The terror audiences feel is partly real. Foster's shaking, her shallow breaths, her darting eyes weren't always scripted. The basement wasn't just a set. It was a psychological gauntlet. Lecter's cell was designed like a chapel Hannibal. Lecter's glass cell isn't just a prison, it's a shrine. Production designer Christy Zaya revealed that the minimalist design was inspired by chapel architecture. Stark walls, symmetrical lines, and bright lighting that forced Lecter into godlike focus. Jonathan Demme wanted audiences to feel like they were entering a sacred, forbidden space when Clarice approached. Notice how the light seems to halo Lecter's head in his first appearance. It wasn't by chance, it was deliberate staging. Not a cage, but a temple of dread. The design forced us to confront Lecter directly without shadows to hide in, intensifying his unnerving presence. The movie sparked LGBTQ+ protests. While The Silence of the Lambs earned acclaim, it also stirred controversy. LGBTQ+ activists criticized the film for portraying Buffalo Bill as a gender non-conforming villain, reinforcing harmful stereotypes. Protests erupted at the 1992 Academy Awards, with demonstrators carrying signs condemning the film's depiction of queerness as monstrous. Jonathan Demme later admitted he regretted not clarifying that Buffalo Bill was not meant to represent transgender people, but rather a fractured identity. The protests marked one of Hollywood's earliest reckonings with LGBTQ plus representation. Not universal praise, but divided legacy. The film forced conversations still relevant in media today. Hopkins terrified Foster off-camera too. During the first read-through, Jodie Foster avoided making eye contact with Anthony Hopkins. She later confessed she was genuinely frightened of him, even off-set. Hopkins stayed in character during rehearsals, speaking with the same calm menace. Foster said she never truly relaxed around him, which Demme encouraged to preserve tension. That unease bleeds onto the screen, giving their exchanges a raw authenticity. It wasn't acting layered over comfort. It was real fear baked into performance. Hopkins blurred the line between role and reality, leaving Foster both terrified and inspired. The predator-prey dynamic audiences saw was partly lived. The ending originally looked very different. In the final cut, Lecter's escape ends with his chilling phone call, "I'm having an old friend for dinner." But the original script included a more violent epilogue showing Lecter stalking Doctor Chilton directly. Demme scrapped it, believing subtle menace was more powerful than gore. The final version leaves audiences unsettled, imagining the inevitable without needing to see it. Not spectacle, but suggestion. That choice elevated the ending into one of the most iconic final lines in cinema history. Hopkins' sly delivery didn't need blood, it needed imagination. The restraint turned terror into legend. It's one of only 3 films to sweep the Big 5 Oscars. At the 1992 Academy Awards, The Silence of the Lambs achieved what almost no film has. It won Best Picture, Best Director, Best Actor, Best Actress, and Best Screenplay. The only other films to do so? It Happened One Night, 1934, and One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, 1975. Not a genre victory, but a seismic moment. A horror thriller often dismissed as low art conquered Hollywood's highest stage. That sweep proved dark, disturbing cinema could carry prestige, forever changing how critics viewed the genre. The Lambs didn't just scream, they silenced the industry's doubts. Hopkins won his role because of The Elephant Man. Here's the twist. Anthony Hopkins got the part of Hannibal Lecter because Jonathan Demme saw him in The Elephant Man. Hopkins played Doctor Trevis with compassion, but Demme was struck by the opposite potential. The coldness in his eyes when silent. He thought, "That's my Lecter." Hopkins, cast for kindness, was chosen to embody evil. Not typecasting, but inversion. The irony? A role defined by empathy unlocked the door to cinema's most terrifying monster. The Silence of the Lambs wasn't just a film. It was a crucible of fear, artistry, controversy, and transformation. What we saw on screen was terrifying, but what happened behind the camera was often stranger. Its legacy is both celebrated and contested, but one truth remains: the Lambs will never stop screaming. If these revelations shocked you, hit like, subscribe, and share your favorite fact in the comments. After all, the truth about movies is often scarier than fiction.